The waters off Vishakhapatnam were unnaturally still that morning, the surface of the Bay of Bengal appearing like polished mercury under the rising sun. Then, one by one, the silhouettes broke the haze. Warships. They emerged as jagged gray ghosts, each flying a different ensign as they closed on the Indian coast. Radar masts and missile canisters cut sharp, aggressive lines against the pale sky, while helicopters sat lashed to aft decks like sleeping dragonflies. It was the opening of Milan 2026, the largest multinational naval gathering in the Indo-Pacific. Dozens of vessels from India, Australia, Japan, France, and beyond flanked the harbor, a formidable assembly where the friction of a fracturing world yielded, however briefly, to the rigid, quiet rituals of maritime diplomacy. The view from the pier. On the concrete expanse of the pier, Lieutenant Arjun Mehta monitored the arrivals. As a designated liaison officer, LO, he was the primary point of contact for the visiting flotilla. He had spent 3 days submerged in arrival windows and the labyrinthine demands of international protocol. To Arjun, this was more than an exercise. It was proof that the sea could still be a bridge, not just a battlefield. Beside him, Sub-Lieutenant Priya Nair shaded her eyes, her gaze fixed on a ship that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. "Another one crossing the breakwater," she noted. Arjun raised his binoculars. Through the glass, he saw a slender, lethal hull cutting a steady wake as Indian harbor pilots guided the vessel toward its berth. He consulted the manifest. "The Iris Dana," he said, "Islamic Republic of Iran Navy." The Dana wasn't the largest ship in the fleet, but it was the most scrutinized. Packed with indigenous radar and long-range anti-ship missiles, it represented Tehran's push for blue water relevance far beyond the Persian Gulf. Its presence here was a calculated move in a very large game of chess. Priya studied the harbor again. "I thought the U.S. Navy was supposed to participate this year." Arjun nodded slightly. "They usually do." He gestured toward the outer anchorage, where warships from dozens of countries sat in long rows across the water. "The last 2 times this exercise was held, 2022 and 2024, the Americans sent a Burke-class destroyer." Priya glanced back toward the harbor. "So where is she this year?" Arjun shrugged faintly. "A destroyer was expected again, USS Pinckney. She had been operating out of Singapore and was supposed to sail here." He paused. "But plans change." "Operational tempo, maybe," he added, "or they have other priorities." Priya studied the long line of ships again. "So no Americans at all?" Arjun shook his head. "Not quite." He nodded toward the sky. "They sent a P-8A Poseidon instead. Maritime patrol aircraft, crew from Patrol Squadron 4. Priya followed his gaze upward. "So the Americans are still here?" "In a way," Arjun said. He smiled slightly. "Just not in the harbor, at least none that we're aware of." Aboard the Dana, Commander Abuzar Zari stood in the shadows of the bridge wing. He was a man shaped by 20 years of the suffocating, salt-heavy heat of Bandar-e-Abbas. To him, the festive crowds on the Vishakhapatnam promenade were a distraction. He didn't look at the waving tourists. He looked past the colorful flags toward the north, in the direction of INS Dega, the Indian Naval Air Station outside Vishak. He knew that on the military flight line of that airbase, a U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon was currently parked, probably checking their sensor calibrations at that very moment. To the tourists, it was just a plane with a long tail. To Zari, it was a predator. He knew that the moment Dana cleared the harbor for the sea phase of the exercise, that aircraft would be loitering at 30,000 feet, invisible in the blue. It would be vacuuming, recording his radar's pulse repetition frequencies, mapping his communications bursts, and cataloging the unique rhythmic thrum of his propellers. "So many ships, Commander," a voice said beside him. It was Navsarvan, Lieutenant Ali Rahmani, one of the ship's more trusted officers of the deck, looked at the floating skyline of foreign steel with genuine wonder. Zari didn't share the wonder. His voice was a low rasp, cured by tobacco and sea air. "That is the illusion, Ali. When navies meet like this, it is to remind everyone that the oceans belong to all of us, but it is also to remind us who is watching whom." The officers' reception. That evening, the Naval Club overlooking Vishakhapatnam Harbor glowed with light as the first officers' reception of Milan began. Strings of white bulbs stretched across the terrace, swaying gently in the humid sea breeze. Beyond the railing, the harbor lay dark and quiet, broken only by the silhouettes of warships resting along the piers. Gray hulls from dozens of navies gathered for the exercise. The terrace itself shimmered with white tropical uniforms. Officers from Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa drifted through the crowd in small clusters, ribbons and shoulder boards catching the light as conversations mixed with the low hum of the harbor below. A small trio played soft instrumental music near the lawn, tabla and keyboard carrying a relaxed rhythm across the gathering. Waiters moved steadily through the crowd with trays of drinks, wine, beer, mango juice, and lime soda, while platters of tandoori chicken, grilled kebabs, and spiced paneer circulated among the guests. Near the harbor railing, Arjun watched the evening unfold with quiet satisfaction. Beside him, Priya had become the focus of attention for several visiting officers. 2 Europeans were speaking with her, both leaning slightly closer than necessary as they asked about the harbor, the fleet review, and which ships would be open for tours the next day. Priya handled the conversation with an easy smile. One officer offered to show her photographs of his frigate. Another joked that tomorrow's harbor tour might require a knowledgeable local guide. Arjun watched for a moment, amused. He stepped closer and said quietly, "Careful. At this rate, half the fleet will volunteer for the harbor tour." Priya laughed softly. "That is the risk of hosting." Arjun Mehta spotted the Iranian commander standing alone near the stone balustrade, his back to the bar. Arjun adjusted his tunic. He recognized the 3 gold stripes on the older man's sleeve and the delicate politics of the night. He approached, carrying 2 tall glasses of chilled pomegranate juice, a deep, dark red that looked like arterial blood under the club's amber lights. Arjun stopped 3 feet away and offered a respectful nod. "Commander Zari," Arjun said, "I am Lieutenant Mehta, your liaison. I hope the Dana found her berth to your satisfaction." He offered one of the glasses. Zari looked at the drink, then at Arjun. He saw the hospitality, but he also saw the irony. The Indians were hosting the Americans at the airbase and the Iranians at the pier. They were perfect middlemen. He took the glass. The cold condensation felt like ice against his scarred palm. "The berth is fine, Lieutenant," Zari said. He gestured toward the dark horizon where the sea met the sky. "You have a beautiful harbor. It feels very safe." Arjun nodded politely. Then, almost casually, he added in Persian, "Kush Amadid be Vizag, Farmande." "Welcome to Vizag, Commander." For the first time that evening, Zari looked directly at him. "Shoma Farsi Baladid?" "You speak Persian?" Arjun only smiled slightly and lifted his glass. "To the gathering," he said. "To Milan." Zari raised the red liquid, but did not take his eyes off the young officer. He drank slowly, then turned his gaze back toward the harbor, where the Dana rested quietly alongside the pier. He thought of the P-8 cruise at INS Degas. "To calm seas, Lieutenant," Zari said. He took another sip. The juice was sweet, But experience had taught Zari that calm seas sometimes hid trouble. "Enjoy the peace tonight," the commander added, staring into the darkness beyond the breakwater. "It is the most fragile thing in this harbor."